Okay, so last night I was in Singapore on the way back from Hong Kong, where I'm teaching a retreat and giving lots of other talks. And I stopped over in Singapore because they were just my groups, my friends over there. They had all clubbed together, many Buddhist temples and groups. And one of the things they were doing together was to try and do some work in the prisons of Singapore, basically the main one in Changi, to be able to help people who were in prison. And so to launch this concerted effort by the Buddhist community in Singapore to look after not just the people in jail but their families, look after them afterwards. We had a little talk about the prisons of the mind. And this is what the subject is going to be this evening, because it's one thing to look at a prison and think it's just a place with high walls. But if you think a prison is a place with high walls, if you go to Bodhinyana Monastery, you'll think that is a prison, because we've got a wall. About 6 kilometers down the road, we've got Karnak Prison Farm. That hasn't got a wall at all, which is one of the reasons why sometimes people who've never been down there before go looking for the monastery, and they go to the prison and ask, are there any monks in here? And we've got the wall, they haven't. But, as you probably all know, that's part of compassionate service in the world, to try and look after people in all sorts of difficult situations. And I've certainly been in prisons in many parts of the world, as many other volunteers here. And especially in my early years here in Perth, as you get more senior, you get more work to do, and so you don't have that opportunity so much to go into prisons. But every now and again I manage to sneak into one. And one of the reasons I don't mind doing that is because I got one of the best compliments in my life because of working in prisons, trying to serve and help people. You know, that sometimes that when we are complimented, sometimes we keep it to ourselves, but it's nice to share, praise, because, you realize that there's something happening here. That's why you get praised. And a lot of times we don't celebrate praise enough in our world. So this is not just, as they say, blowing my own trumpet or skiting. There's something important to learn from this, because one day down at the monastery in Serpentine, I received a telephone call from a prison officer who asked me why I couldn't come and teach in his prison again. And I mentioned I was so busy with so many other duties. And he said, no, I want you to come back again. And I said, I'll send another monk. And he said, no, I want you, Ajahn Brahm. Now, when somebody says that, the obvious question afterwards is, why me? And that's when he gave me this compliment, which I will take to my grave. It's a very beautiful compliment, because it really meant so much, not just to me, but for I don't know how many 100 people or 200 people. Because he said to me that he was about to retire after many years working in the prison service as an officer, as custodial officer. And he said that in all his years working in prisons, he noticed something unique which stood out with all the people who came to my class. He said, I've never seen this happen before, only with you, but all the prisoners who came to your class, when they were released, never went back to jail again. He said, I don't know what you're doing, but it's something amazing. Please come back again. And that really meant something to me. Somehow or other, I was teaching them or guiding them in such a way that when they were released from prison eventually, they never went back again. And that was so extraordinary to this prison officer who'd worked so hard. That's why he wanted me to go back there. And that made me think, what was I doing? Why was it that people who were in this really difficult situation could actually leave that prison, go back to life, have relationships, get a job, work, succeed, and have a really good life? And I do remember at Perth Airport some years ago, I don't know, I spent a lot of time in those places. I don't know if she's even here tonight, but as I came in this afternoon, one of the customs officers, they're supposed to be, checking everything. As soon as they saw me, hands up, Ajahn Brahm, welcome back. Through you go. So, of course, I won't abuse that trust. I am a good monk. But you've got to be careful sometimes. So please, if you are that person, don't give me special privileges. You might get the sack. But it's nice to be recognized. But I was waiting in the airport once, and I felt someone put their hand on my shoulders, and I turned around. And there was this guy with a big smile on his face, a nice suit. It was one of the prisoners I taught. And he looked at me and smiled. He's obviously doing really well. And he said, I still meditate every day, Ajahn Brahm. I still meditate every day. And things like that give you a lot of joy. It's actually working. But the main thing, which I did over there, may have come from my Buddhist training, or it may come from my knowledge of psychology, because it was something I had learned when I was training to be a school teacher. And I mentioned this in my first book, Opening the Door of Your Heart, but very rarely do I talk about it. But in this talk this evening, it is crucial to understanding the whole of this talk, and many other things in your life. It was an experiment which was done in child psychology many, many years ago, which we heard in a lecture at the university where I was studying to be a teacher. It was a school which had 2 classes of children in every year. And a couple of psychologists had the opportunity, they were given permission to try this experiment on a class of maybe grade 8s or 9s at a time when it wasn't really crucial, it wouldn't really affect them too much. And what they did is they gave them an end-of-year examination, but they never published the results of that examination. But what they did do was put half the children in Class A and the other half in Class B. But they tried to choose the 2 classes as equally as possible. So what they actually did, the child who came first went into the same class as the one who came 5th and 6th, 9th and 10th, 13th and 14th, 17th and 18th. And the child who came 2nd and 3rd went into the same class with the children who came 6th and 7th, 10th and 11th. They split them up as evenly as they possibly could on the results of their tests at the end of the year. And the principal, who was the only other person who knew what was going on, chose teachers who she thought were equally capable, and even went to the trouble of finding classrooms which had equal facilities. They went out of their way to make these 2 classes as equal as possible, except for that one thing, calling one Class A and the other one Class B. That was the only difference. Now, of course, you would assume, like everyone else does, that the children in Class A were chosen as the top half on the basis of those tests, and the ones in Class B were the ones who did worst. That's the assumption we had. That's what the parents thought. So some of those kids, they went home. You're in Class B. No playing soccer for you. No computer games. You have to work harder. No privileges anymore. I want you to do better next year. And that's some kids who made it into Class A. Look, I don't know how you did that. You haven't been doing any homework all year, but well done. Carry on. They assumed that Class A kids were the better and the Class B kids were the worst. And so did the children themselves. And so did the teachers. They taught the Class A kids. They expected more from them, and the teachers expected far less from the Class B kids. And the chilling thing was they continued that on for the 9 months of the school year. And when they gave them the test, the end-of-year exam, at the end of that year, the children in Class B did so badly, just as you would have expected if they were the bottom half from the year before. Literally, in 12 or 9 months, they had become Class B kids, simply because they believed they were Class B children. And that gives you an understanding why people who do go to prisons go back again afterwards. You put a person in a prison, you call them a criminal, you dress them as criminals, they're reminded that they're criminals, They think they're criminals. They become criminals. And they perform as criminals. That is how the psychology of judging happens. Now that's a very powerful little teaching, because you can expand that in all areas of your life. If you call your husband stupid for 9 months, he will become stupid. You do, that's what happens. So whose fault is it? You know whose fault it is now. If you call your kid a dummy, if you call your kid lazy, that's where your kid becomes lazy. Now do you see just how we actually take on these labels? And because of that, we make a prison out of the labels which are given to us. You are a criminal. You are a murderer. You are a thief. And I love telling people that all the times, and I've been in prisons many times over 40 years, I've never ever seen a criminal inside jail. And I've never seen a thief, a murderer. I've been in Houses of Parliaments. I've seen many presidents, prime ministers, and all the politicians I've ever seen, I've never seen a liar. I've seen a politician who lies, but never a liar. I've seen people in prison who have murdered, but they're not murderers. I've seen people who've stolen, but they're not thieves. They're a person who's stolen. They're a person who's lied. They're a person who's done a crime, but they're not a criminal. And that was the attitude which I had whenever I went into prisons, to tell them that you're not a criminal, you're a person who's done a crime. Now that also comes up with that story, and I'm not going to say it totally, just pretty much in brief, because it's one of my most well-known stories of the 2 bad bricks in the wall. 2 bad bricks in the wall down at Serpentine. I did that wall. I was so embarrassed I wanted to destroy the wall because it spoiled the whole wall, until somebody told me there's 998 other bricks in that wall. And as soon as I could see those 998 other bricks, I realized it was a good wall. How often in life do we see faults and we think that's a bad wall because of 2 bad bricks? How often is it we see someone who's actually stolen and we call them a thief? What about the 998 other bricks in their wall? Well, that's such a strong story of mine. One of the prisoners over in our local jail, Carnet, just up the road from Bodignana, he was a murderer. He's just coming to the end of his sentence. And apparently people were telling me he was going around Carnet Prison Farm just saying, it's just 2 bad bricks, that's all it is. Just 2 bad bricks. He's finally understood himself, what he did and why he did it, and all the other things he did in life. I haven't met that guy yet, but I'm sure that when he does get parole, that's it. He will never do such a thing again. He's got that self-respect. He's not a murderer. He realizes that. He's a person who's done murder, but he's not a murderer. What about you? What wrong things have you done? Have you lied? Does that make you a liar? Have you stuffed up? Does that make you stupid? You've done a maths class and you failed. Does that mean you can't do maths? It just means you haven't done a test, that's all. It doesn't mean you can't do maths. Whatever it is, sometimes we get judged, we believe that, and we become a prisoner of that label. Now that's just not with the behavior we do, because if you want to get people to do good behavior, just forget about the bad behavior and focus on the good stuff. Positive reinforcement again, you've all heard that before. You have to remember the positive first. So what about the prison of the past? Are you in the jail of the past because you broke up with a boyfriend? It's really hurt. You've been cheated, by your wife. In your business, somebody's promised, haven't come up, and you've really suffered financially. Have you got cancer or other diseases in the past? Are you a prisoner of the past so much so that you can't let it go. The past is a prison which people make for themselves, but it's a prison whose cell door is always open. You can walk out any time you like, any time you feel you want to. But the problem with the past, after a while we get so Buddhist attached to it, obsessed with it, we define ourselves by it, that to walk out from the past and to forgive and let go is just as difficult as a person who's been in prison for 20 years who tomorrow has their freedom and they don't want to leave prison. They're afraid of freedom. A lot of times people can't let go of things like grief and anger because they don't want to. They're afraid of freedom. And that is one of the reasons why we're in the prison of the past. Each one of you have had some bad times in the past, things which have really hurt you, people you're really angry at, and sometimes people you just can't forgive. You can forgive anyone if you know how to do it. And so how do you do that? How can you let go and move away from the prisons of the past, especially the anger which you have towards someone, or the guilt you have, or the grief you have, which is an anger against life, because someone you love very much has died tragically. How can you move out of those prisons? What you do is to use the simile in our modern prison system of parole, or temporary release for over the weekends, which when you come into the end of the sentence, people give them parole. They go out maybe for a few days, like if you come to our retreat centre, Jhana Grove, to do a retreat with us, you will see many murderers and rapists walking around our meditation retreat centre. They're not murderers and rapists, but they're people who've done those things. These prisoners who come on work release and help out at our meditation retreat centre. It's amazing. I don't tell people what they've done until after they get to know them. When they get to know them, they say, well, these are really nice people. Yeah, do you know what they did? And afterwards they realise that what I'm saying, that if you've done a murder doesn't make you a murderer. These are really nice people. Amazing, isn't it? Can you imagine that? Obviously it is, because you see the person, not the crime. And so when you look at the past, you can move outside of that prison if you can give yourself parole. That's why we do little things like meditation. It's parole from your past. As you let go of the past just for half an hour and feel what it's like when you don't have to get so angry, guilty, or grief-stricken by what has happened to you. You have let it go just for a little while to show you what it's like to let go of the past and actually be here. Once you have that parole and you get used to it, the fear of letting go of the past is overcome, little by little. So you find you can let go. And because I've been meditating for such a long time, it's so easy for me to let go of the past. So much so that many of you come up and say, do you remember me? Oh, come on, give me a break. Unless I've seen you just this afternoon, I've probably forgotten you, because I see so many people. I let go pretty quickly. Don't carry any baggage. Isn't that light? If those people ever meet me at the airport, no, this is, you see me, this is absolutely true. This is what I carry. This is my suitcase, my luggage, one change of clothes, or actually underclothes, and a few other little bits and pieces. That's all I carry on the aircraft if I go overseas for 2 weeks, for a month, or whatever. It's all I need. And I see people's incredible big suitcases. You poor things. You're carrying those all the time. And this is a symbol. When you can let go of things, you are like a light traveller. You move in and out. I wasn't the first off the plane today, but number 2, because you just go straight out. You don't have to wait around that turntable thing, waiting for things like people have to do for a long time. So that's when you can let go of the past. That's similar. You feel so free to enjoy the present moment. Why are you sacrificing the happiness and the joy and the life of now because of something which happened in the past which you can't change anyway? It's done, it's finished. Whatever they did, it's their karma. You can't change it. Whatever you did, it's your karma. It's done, it's finished. Can't you let it go? Sometimes people keep telling me, no, you must not let it go. That was one of the questions which came up last night. He said, no, because you have to learn by your mistakes. You have to understand them so you never make the same mistakes again. How many times have you tried that? It does not work. It's about time more people actually realize that that is one of the great myths, learning from the past. You learn from the present, not from the past. You learn much more from what's happening now than you'll ever learn from what happened in the past. That is why, if you want to be happy, healthy, successful in life, learn from now. And don't waste these opportunities of now going over stuff which happened a long time ago. Let it go. And now you're learning. So when we can do this, we're actually free from so many prisons. I've seen so many people, years, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, still suffering over the loss of someone you loved very, very dearly. I've seen them crying after 4 or 5 years because they were cheated by somebody and lost their business. I've seen them just so upset they can't live, because they were heartbroken. Somebody let them down. I don't know, there was that Dickens novel, remember Great Expectations and Mrs. Havisham, for those of you who know English literature. Mrs. Havisham, she was a young lady, and at her wedding the groom never turned up. And she was stuck in that past. In the room where they had the wedding dinner, it was covered with cobwebs because she wouldn't even clean the room and change the dishes, and everything else was there. She just left it. Just a total prisoner of the past, ruining her whole life because of something unfair and unfortunate which happened to her when she was a young woman. That was a very brilliant little part by Charles Dickens of why people get imprisoned by the past. Now that is something you should release yourself from. Parole, first of all. See what it's like when you forget about it for half an hour. And little by little, you learn how to walk out. Forgiveness, not guilt. That's why I said, give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't know why people did that. Whatever they did, that's their karma. I am not going to suffer because what other people did. I'm not even going to suffer because of what I did. I'm going to let that past go to be free and learn from the present moment. That's the first prison which I ask you to be free from. And the second prison is the prison of the future. It's amazing how many people are afraid, especially young people these days, of global warming. It's been a very, very hot summertime. Hasn't rained yet, apparently. Is this the start of drought until the global warming is starting now? And there's only a few years left. Are you imprisoned by fear of what might happen? Are you imprisoned by the fear of the economy and you losing your job, especially if you work for Qantas? Are you afraid? That is being in the prison of fear, anxiety of the future. And you ask people who got really into anxiety disorder, they are in a prison. They're more in a prison than people in Alcatraz or Sing Sing or wherever it is, because they have no freedom at all to enjoy life. They're always afraid. So how do you let go of the fear of the future, the prison of the future, to realize that is a prison you make up? It's not real. Because I've noticed much of what happens in life which I was afraid of never happens. Never happens. It's usually something much worse. No, it's not. You may be afraid of what's going to happen to the building project at Dhammasara. Don't worry about it. It's all going to go haywire. Let it. So when you're in a prison of the future, you're so looking at what you're afraid of in the future. You're not really looking right now where you can actually do something. And it's amazing. People who think and worry so much about the future, they miss the places where the future is being made and where you can make it really good. By being afraid of the future, you make a bad future. But if you can free yourself from the prison of fear of the future and anxiety, and just be in this moment, it's amazing just what can happen. I fly a lot. I do miss planes sometimes. Are you afraid of missing a plane? You know, you're looking at the watch, there's only half an hour to go, there's only 10 minutes to go. I once almost missed a plane. It was again in Singapore. The reason was, I was at not even going through immigration yet, and people were asking me, just one more question, this is important about meditation. And by the time I got to the gate, they were calling out my name. That's how close I got. And sometimes you miss the flight. It doesn't matter you miss a flight. You can get another flight the next day or the next afternoon. So what? Big deal. Don't be afraid. Because when things go wrong, that's when life gets very interesting. You meet new people. You do new things. And it's amazing. If life goes according to plan, it's like knowing the last episode of the soap opera. Someone tells you, who killed what and what's going to happen and how they get out of things. If you know everything in the future like that, this life becomes really dull. If you've got a cricket match and you know who's going to win before they even start, what sort of match is that? It's just hopeless. So the uncertainty of life gives life its flavour. So instead of being afraid and being in the prison of the future, be free. No fear. And it's amazing just how, when you have no fear and you're free of the prison of the future, how you can create a wonderful future. And there's no end of things you can do. I was telling people over in Singapore that some years ago I taught a retreat for the weekend in a beautiful area of the south of England called the New Forest. And when I was in there and look at all these signs and the history of the so-called New Forest, this was in UK. By new, it meant 400 years old. Because it's a really old country. And that was a desolate moorland 400 years ago because the British Navy cut down all the trees to make ships to fight the Spanish. They were always at war with somebody. And they needed the wood, and there's a whole forest, many square miles of forest were denuded. And what these people did, they actually replanted. And 400 years later, you can't tell the difference between a natural old-growth forest and this beautiful forest which was replanted. For me, I always remember that gives me hope. I also remember as a young man in London, I was telling someone earlier that where I was born and grew up was a suburb right next to Shepherd's Bush. People know Shepherd's Bush in London. So I always tell people here in Australia that I'm a boy from the bush. I grew up in the bush. And they think, wow, where did you grow up? Was it sort of in Bush Victoria or north up in Western Australia? So no, Shepherd's Bush. But, in those areas, I remember walking down the River Thames as a young boy, seeing all these signs. If you fall in, call the ambulance, go to the hospital straight away. Because that river was polluted, big time. So dangerous that no one could swim in there. You couldn't fish in there. There was no fish there at all. Stinky, polluted, so dangerous there were signs. If you fall in, ambulance straight away, don't mess around. That's how dangerous it was. And you know that now there's fish in the water, it's really clean. You know how they did that? It was a very interesting piece of environmental insight. The local government passed a very simple law that all of the businesses, the factories, the farms, whoever was using that water which they had a right to use, the law was your inlet pipe had to be downstream of your outlet pipe. So in other words, what you took in was what you put out. And that was a very simple law. And because of that, they had to clean up, because whatever pollution, they got first before anybody else. Simple law cleaned up the River Thames. Now, I like telling people that because it shows there is such a thing as hope. You can mend things. You can overcome cancers. You can get your life back together, whatever happens to you in business. And I say that because when you are afraid, you make a prison for yourself, which means you can't live, you can't succeed in life. So please be free from the prison of negativity for the future, called fear and anxiety. Now, what more prisons can we be free of? I've already mentioned in passing about being free of labels. You are a criminal. You are stupid. Has anyone ever told you that? I did an experiment when I was a school teacher. One of my classes was in maths. I taught maths and physics and general science. And I looked at the records from the year before, and I figured out which kid had come bottom of the class in maths the year before. And I identified him. And I did this because I wanted to find out whether this guy was stupid at maths or whether he could do maths. So what I did, every lesson I taught this particular class, I would always go to this kid and say, do you understand it? Give him some encouragement. At the end of the lesson, just take him aside, anything he didn't understand. I gave him encouragement, and at the end of the year, this is no exaggeration, that kid came number one in the maths class, top. I'd taken him from bottom to top because I wanted to prove to myself whether it's the case you can't do it. If you believe you can't, then you won't. If you are not a prisoner of these labels, stupid, bad at maths, not a musician, if you believe in that, you have now made a prison. I see many people who have taken up, remember this one guy, a Buddhist over in New Zealand, took up the cello when he was 65, now plays in an orchestra. Now that's the sort of people I really admire, people who just say, there's no such thing as I can't do it. I'm going to give it a go, see what happens. Because they are not in a prison. They are free to grow and explore and do whatever they feel they would like to. Now, unfortunately, we've got many people in the prisons of mental illness. And please, I am very passionate about this, because when somebody comes to me, especially a parent, and say, my child's got ADD, I say, what are those, please excuse me, those psychologists telling you? A child has not got ADD. A child is not an ADD child. They're a person who has symptoms of ADD from time to time. There's no such thing as a schizophrenic person. There's a person who has episodes of schizophrenia. There's other bricks in their wall. And I mention that because, again, one of my other wonderful experiences, I don't know why I keep on saying Singapore, probably because I remember that because I was there last night. I did a keynote address to the Institute of Mental Health in Singapore some years ago, after which I told all these stories like I'm telling you this evening. And this professor of mental health came up to see me to say, thank you, great talk, can you come and see my ward and bless it? And say, what ward is that? It's a schizophrenia ward. And I said, how do you treat schizophrenics in your ward in Singapore? And that's when he smiled at me and he said, just like you said in your talk, Ajahn Brahm, I do not treat schizophrenia. I treat the other part of the patient. And I was so impressed with that. I put my hands up, which is an object of respect and worship. And that guy was a Christian. I respect your wisdom. You have understood what so many people don't. There is no such thing as a schizophrenic. There's a person who has episodes of schizophrenia. If you call yourself a schizophrenic, you're in the prison of mental illness, and there's no way out. if you say you're a person who has episodes of schizophrenia, there's a way out, the door's open. There's another part to you. There's more than the 2 bad bricks in the wall. You can see the other bricks. You know what he said afterwards? Because I asked him the obvious question, what's the results? How are you doing? And he smiled again and said, much better, significantly better than other conventional treatments of schizophrenia. Brilliant. Now all of you who've come and seen me, and you say you've got this disease, you're depressed, you've got cancer, how many times have I told you, very good? What the hell are you talking about, Ajahn Brahmavamso? Very good, you've got cancer. You know, your mother's just died and you're grief-stricken, and say very good. Because I want to point you to the other part of you which is not grief-stricken because of your mother died, the other part of your life, not the part which is suffering because your mum has died. When you come with any mental illness like depression or even ADD, I want to tell you about the other part of you, which isn't depressed, which isn't ADD, which isn't anxious. That is there too. Can you see that? When you see that, that grows, and you're not in a prison of those labels which people put on you again and again and again. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the game of being a doctor or being a psychiatrist or any other psychologist. You put these names on people because it's easy to do so. But ask any clinical psychologist, and the number of people who have, say, bipolar, that there's no 2 people who are the same. It's just a general sort of term, which is very loose. And because you say a person's bipolar, they look it up and say, wow, that's me, and they become bipolar. How many of you have looked at your horoscope? You say, oh, this is what's going to happen to me this month, and it does then. You make it happen. It's amazing just how what you believe is going to happen does happen. What you believe you are, you become. Just like those Class B kids. So, how can you be free of those mental illnesses? How can you be free of those prisons? Can you understand now? This beautiful way. I don't mean you don't take your medication. Take your medication, just like I sometimes take an aspirin or a Panadol if I've got a headache. But I don't think I've got a headache all the time, just because I have episodes of like indigestion or something. Now you can understand how we make these prisons. Now the last prisons you can make. This is briefly a story I love telling on retreats, because a lot of times people don't understand what real freedom means. They're always trying to improve themselves or make themselves better and change things. Because once I actually change things, make myself better, then I'll be free of all my problems. Ha ha ha. You spend all your life trying to improve yourself and you die before you finish. Everyone does. So how can you be free from the prison of trying to make yourself different? I like telling the story. I'll tell it in brief. Many of you know before. A monk who went to prison, it was Casuarina jail here in Perth. After 4 or 5 weeks, the prisoners asked him to stay behind. They talked to him, what's it like in a Buddhist monastery? What do you guys do? And I won't go into the full details. I've told this story many times before. When the prisoners in Casuarina jail heard how austere it is living in a Buddhist monastery, sleeping on the floor, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I have to tell this joke. I tell it every time, but it's a good joke. Getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning at Bodhinyana Monastery is optional. You can always get up earlier if you like. That's the only option, not later. So, you get up early, and they say we don't get up that early in prison. No, it's maybe 6 o'clock. You can get up, but not 4 o'clock. And we meditate, no TV. You get TV in jail. The breakfast you have, come and stay at Bodhinyana Monastery. It's actually got a bit softer these days, but most of the time I just get a cup of porridge, and that's it, and a cup of tea. And I say, I'm in prison. You know, if you ever go into prison, you get pancakes and waffles, bacon and eggs. If you're a vegetarian, you get vegetarian food, vegan food, every fruit you can ever want. and just whatever else you want there. Everything, cornflakes and other flakes and muesli and whatever you want is there. And if, probably Asian food there, you can have some porridge and some dumplings, dim sum, I don't know what you want, but it's there in prison. Anything. Not like monastery. And they say, what do? We work very hard. Many of you have seen nuns working, we work as well, really hard. And prisoners don't work like that. And they get lunch, lunch all in one bowl. Everything goes on top of one another. It does, we've had that many, many times. I've already mentioned, I think last night, the strawberry ice cream on spaghetti. I remember having custard on curry. Have you had something like that, Kunika? No? Really? It will come, just wait. She's only just become a nun. And that's disgusting, to have all that stuff. And so even if you get solitary confinement in prison, you get a tray with all the different compartments. Not in monastery, all in one go. And then afternoon, what do you do? Can you play sport? We can't play sport. The reason my monks and nuns can't play sport, people ask, why can't you play sport? It's because we're compassionate. We'll always lose because we don't like to hurt the opposition. So you just meditate all afternoon. And then what time do you have dinner? We don't have any dinner. In prison, they have tea in the afternoon, dinner, and really big dinners. Whatever you want is there for you. And no dinner. So what do you do in the evening? Can you play cards or something? No, just meditate. What time do you go to sleep? And as I said, I usually go to sleep about 10 o'clock. Sleep on the floor. You go into my cave. Many of you have gone into my cave where I sleep in Bodhinyana Monastery. It's on the floor. Even in prison, even murderers, they get a nice cot with a thick mattress and pillow and dunas to sleep on, not me. So it's fascinating that on this little event, one of the prisoners was so amazed at how austere life in a Buddhist monastery is and how comfortable it is in jail. They literally forgot where they were. And they said, that's terrible in your monastery. We like you. Why don't you come in here and stay with us? And that's what they said. And of course, that was related to the monastery, and we all laughed. But then afterwards I thought, well, what is the difference between a monastery and prison? And this is an important part of the story. In Bodhinyana Monastery, I don't know how many there was on the waiting list before, 17 people on the waiting list to try and come into Bodhinyana Monastery. There's another one in Hong Kong, just was waiting. If I told him today, he'd come over and become a monk. So it's a whole waiting list of people trying to get into Bodhinyana Monastery. What's the waiting list at Dhammasara? 5 to 10 people trying to get in to nuns monastery. How many people are trying to get into prison? There's no waiting list. They're all trying to get out. So why is that? What's the difference between a monastery and a prison? There's only one difference. People in a monastery want to be there. In a prison, you don't want to be there. And that is the definition of prison. Any place you don't want to be is your prison. Now, there's many prisons in life, and this is probably the most powerful part of this little talk this evening. If you're in this room and you want to get out, this room is now your prison. You don't want to be here. If you're in a relationship which you're not happy with, you want to get out of that relationship. That relationship is your prison. You don't want to be there. It's a prison for you. You've made a prison. If you're in a job you hate, your office where you go to work is your prison. And even if you're in a body which is very old and sick and aching and you don't want to be in it, your body becomes your prison. You may have some sickness, still be young, but have some sickness. You're now in a prison. How do you escape from the prisons you make in life? So easy. You don't have to change your partner. Want to be there. Want to be with him or her. And then your relationship is no longer a prison. You want to be there. It doesn't matter how good or bad she is, or he is. Just like monastery, it's very ascetic, but we want to be there. We appreciate it. That's why it's not a prison for us. We're free. And an old body, a sick body, do you want to be there? or do you want to be somewhere else? If you want to be somewhere else, your body is your prison. That's why I always tell doctors, psychologists, please don't try to cure someone. Try and care for them instead. Then cures happen. Caring is accepting a person, letting them be, instead of trying to make them different. How many of you are trying to cure your partner? And what's it like? You're going to make your relationship terrible. Care for them. Don't try and cure them of their bad habits. Care for them. And then you're happy to be there with them. Your relationship's not a prison. Your job, even sitting here in this room, if you're happy to be here, it's not a prison, you are free. So please change your attitude. Want to be here, and then you are free. And that's incredibly powerful teaching, because there are so many prisons you will experience in life. And all you need to do is to change your attitude and you feel all the freedom. Do you want to feel freedom? Do you want what the Buddha called the taste of freedom? Want to be here with who you're with, where you are, so you don't want to be anywhere else in the whole world other than here. Then you are free. That is how I meditate. I sit down, I don't care what I feel like, tired, sort of restless, whatever I feel, I'm happy to be here. That's how I create inner freedom. Not trying to change things, happy to be here. Not trying to cure things, caring for them, happy to be here. Not trying to change your kids, loving them for who they are, just wanting them to be here. That is where we have freedom. Such a simple teaching. And all the prisons we make in our life, always wanting to be somewhere else. And in particular, please remember this teaching when you're on your deathbed. When you're on your deathbed, it may be aching, it may be painful, it may be just even tragic. If you want to be free at the very end, you won't be able to cure or take away the pain or take away the fact that you are dying. You know that. Please want to be here. Change your attitude, and then your last moments will never feel like a prison. You'll have all the freedom you could ever want. Happy to be here. It's so easy to do when you understand how to escape from prison. Happy to be here. Then it's no longer a prison. You're free at last. Escaping from the prisons of life. Thank you. Sadhu. Very good. Okay, so let's have some questions, comments, complaints, as I usually have. Have the overseas ones first of all. There usually is a few. Okay. From Sri Lanka, Dubai and Belgium. You know, wherever I go, it's just somebody, where are they? They came back from Thailand and said, even the north of Thailand, there's so many people listen to this Friday night talk. And in Hong Kong, where I just come back to, these Friday night talks are just, even last year sometimes said there's over about 40, 50,000 downloads. A couple of years ago there was. I don't know how many downloads now every time, but people actually listen to this live. That's why they can ask questions. So we've got Sri Lanka first of all. What is your advice to teachers and parents who actually show children how to build those prison walls and are teaching them how to make the prison walls strong too? Look, if you listen to some of these talks and change your attitudes, because sometimes all it takes is a change of perception from looking to the left, looking to the right, and you see it, and now you realize what you're doing. Making a prison of your grief, making a prison of the past. You have been hurt, your heart has been broken, but please don't make a prison out of that. Want to be here? Let it happen, let it grow. Shit of the past is fertilizer, remember. That is how you don't make prisons anymore. You can feel free, you're happy to be here. So tell the children that. When I was in Hong Kong, China, they were talking about tiger mums. Remember Tiger Mum article? That is not the way to bring up kids. Apparently dolphin mums are the best way. Play with your kids. Get close to your kids. And you will find with the dolphin mums, you will actually have far better kids. They have these ideas in sociology and psychology. They investigate them and they look that this actually works. It's intuitive, you know. Too strict on your kids. Yeah, your kids do well at school, but just emotionally they're really stunted. Look after their emotions. Emotional intelligence, as Daniel Goleman wrote in his great book, then they're going to be successful and happy. So that's what dolphins do. They play and have a great time with their kids, you know, jumping up and down through the water, spending time with them, and they become really top-class dolphins when they grow up. So first of all, if you want to stop other people making those prison walls, know what prison is. What is a prison? And then once we realize, God, I've made myself so many prisons. I like telling the story. The last time I made a prison for myself, I was in Indonesia, where I'm very well known. And there was a talk with about 5,000 people, and there's a whole lot of them were lining up, as far as I could see, wanting me to sign their books and take a photograph. Now, it took about 2 hours to get to the end of the queue, doing nothing else, signing a book, smiling for the photograph, sign another book, smile for the photograph, sign another book. Now, after about an hour of that, I really lost my patience. And I started thinking, what am I doing this for? This is not what a monk is supposed to be doing. I never signed up for this. This was not in my contract. I don't want to be here. And then I realized, you just made a prison for yourself. And so I realized that because I teach other people. What I teach you, I learn myself. I practice myself. And I realized, oh God, I've lost it. I've made a prison for myself. So I just changed. I wanted to be there then. I'm going to be happy to be here. Sign a book, you know, a bit of extra, make it sure it's nice and neat, and really smile. Instead of a fake one. And then the time went so beautifully. I had a wonderful time. 2 hours was well spent, and it was fun to do. Because then I was free. I was happy to be there. And I realized that sometimes you've got to be very careful. If you want to be somewhere else, you're not being free, you're not enjoying life. You have to be there, you've got no choice. So I'm happy with being there. And so that's why I decided I know when I make a prison, and I'm going to unmake it straight away. From Dubai, my question relating to the prison of fear. I have an opportunity to travel to Bhutan, but I'm afraid of taking the flight, as Paro Airport is one of the most dangerous in the world. I have family to take care of, and hence I'm afraid to travel. Am I being imprisoned by my fears, or is this a rational decision? I was there a month ago to Paro Airport to go into Bhutan. No, it's not afraid. It's really exciting. I was really amazed by that, because as the plane goes in, this is Himalayan mountains, okay? This is really, really big mountains, not like Mount Lawley or the hills. This is real stuff. And the only way, you have to land in the valleys, but the valleys are all curved all over the place. So I was amazed that as we were coming into land, for those people who've done it, it's one of the most amazing landings. It's the best part of the trip, not the best part, but one of the best parts. Because you look out the window on the left, and you can actually see the mountain go way above you. And the one on the right, another mountain going away. You're in the valley. And then you're landing, okay? And you have to veer like 90 degrees on one side, and then another 2 minutes, and 90 degrees on the other side as you weave through the valleys to come down. And you have to descend quite steeply as well. Apparently the aircraft have special engines. The Airbus have made these engines doubly powerful because they need that to maneuver. Especially for that one airport. And that's really good fun. I wouldn't miss that for the world. So, Agnes from Dubai, go for it, girl. It's really good fun. And look, I've been there. It's now blessed. So you'll be totally safe. So it is. Because you're afraid, some people are afraid of flying, and it means they just can't visit their family, they can't go overseas. And there are prisons. So soften the future. Like I've just said, it's beautiful, it's fun. I'm just giving another attitude towards the future, and you find And if you look for all the danger, you'll see all the danger. If you see for all the excitement and the fun, you see the fun. So that's how you change the prison of fear. Soften it. Change it. Have fun with it. And it's not fearful anymore. But it is a prison. And probably, of all the prisons in the world, the prison of fear is probably got the most people inside of it, the most inmates. It's amazing how many people are afraid. Young people are afraid of going asking somebody out. You like them, what's he going to say to me? Oh, I don't know if I can. For goodness sake, try it. You see a nice guy, you want to talk to him, go for it. And don't be afraid. Who knows, that could be the best thing. A business opportunity. You see it and you don't take it. And afterwards you say, why did I not do that? Just because of fear. Going overseas, meditating, whatever it is. Becoming a monk. Don't be afraid, it's a great life, go for it. Actually, I better not, because there's too much of a waiting list, so maybe worse. And lastly, from Belgium, I feel totally stuck at the age of 45. After a life that is a series of traumas and hurt, it is like the net closing in, and I don't know what to do anymore in this world. And I don't seem to understand. Is shaving my head and becoming a bhikkhuni a solution? It sure feels attractive. Yeah, bhikkhunis are attractive. A bald head is sexy. He said, I don't know. I'm only making this up. They said it's attractive. No, seriously. Okay, you've had a series of trauma and hurt. Okay, why keep thinking about it? It's one of the craziest things. You've been hurt so many times, and every time you remember it, you're allowing yourself to get hurt again. Someone has cheated you. They cheated me. Why did they cheat me? They shouldn't have done that. Every time they remember it, they are hurting you again. Okay, somebody, your boyfriend sort of cheated on you, they slept with your best friend. Why do you keep remembering it? Every time, you never did anything wrong, they did. Why do you allow them to keep hurting you? When you put it like that, it's absolutely ridiculous, illogical, crazy stuff. And all we need to do, I'm letting it go. I'm not going to allow that BASTARD to make me angry anymore. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to be free. And that will teach him a lesson. Just do it out of spite, if nothing else. So yeah, you had trauma and hurt, but if you think that that is who you are, if you think you are a Class B person, they want to become a bhikkhuni, so there must be a girl. If you think you're a Class B woman, then you become a Class B woman. And what happens is all that series of trauma and hurt keeps on coming, because that's who you think you are. Please do not define yourself by 2 bad bricks, or even 998 bad bricks. See the good bricks, define yourself by that. There's no such thing as a murderer. A person has done a murder. They're much bigger than that. The woman from Belgium, you are much bigger than the trauma and hurt you've experienced in your life, which is quite a considerable amount. But you are much bigger than that. Focus on the other part of you. Like you focus not on the schizophrenia, but the other part of you. If you can focus on the part which was not traumatic, which was not hurtful, and there are huge numbers of experience where that was true, then the net doesn't close in anymore. You found the hole, the freedom. You're out of prison. Well done. So, hopefully that helped. Any questions here from the audience here? Yeah. Yeah. This is for people overseas, so they can hear you. Yeah.
People seem to either be in denial of it or simply not aware of it, and a lot of people don't take it very seriously.
Yep.
We've got some leading Mahayana monks who are saying now that the world has only 100 years. Should we all just take a big, deep breath and say that's the end of the human race?
Now that is a prison of fear and a prison of thinking that that's going to happen.
Concern and
Oh yeah, no, that's a different one. The prison
that's
of,
a prison
sorry.
of taking it seriously. Because
Exactly.
all the young people here, obviously they want to live past 100 years, and if you've got senior monks who are stating this openly, I assume you know who I'm talking about. And, it is a very serious issue. It doesn't seem to be taken very seriously at a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Are we to just assume that the Buddhist way is to say it's okay that the world finishes in 100 years and not to be concerned about it?
We even don't just talk about the young people. Many of us are going to get reincarnated within 100 years and witness it if it happens. Just because we die, we're not out of here. We come back again. Now, I think I gave a talk like that the other day, that if we could only believe, and that this is actually a truth, its evidence is really, really strong of reincarnation. That's another talk. But if we could actually understand that, and people could understand that you are going to come back. That Mr. Abbott, he's going to come back to Australia. He is going to suffer the effects of it.
Are we doing enough now to prevent what potentially doesn't have to happen, and saying, is it okay that we be reincarnated with the associated problems of the anguish, watching our loved ones die, such and such and so and so?
Yeah.
Isn't it a better thing to actually become a protector of the environment rather than allow these things to happen, which seems to be what's currently happening?
Exactly. But I ask, why is that happening? Why are people in denial? What is the obstacle? And it's fear again. Because a lot of times people say there's nothing we can do. Now that is the problem. Is it everything
fear?
We could do.
Is it fear, or is it not wanting to know? Is it
That's why we don't want to know.
We don't want to know, but
because we're afraid of the consequences. We're afraid of having to do things, sacrifice things, whatever. It is that prison of fear. And if we say, look, it's a fact, there's things we can do about it. If we can have hope, the reason I didn't like that Mahayana monk saying we've only got 100 years, if we do that, then it's a waste of time doing anything. We're going to all die, let's just enjoy ourselves before it happens.
Now he's suggesting the opposite.
Oh, that's good then.
He's suggesting that we actually
do something.
It becomes a revolution where things change
and
change very rapidly. But we all make changes, and we all make changes, radical changes to our lives now, rather than allowing it to happen and ignoring it and not taking it seriously, which is the prevailing way society is dealing with it.
It is. And why does it feel like that? Again, to have the hope. If you're going to look in the future, at least have a positive view about it. And if you can look at the positive view about what we can do, how we can do it. I went to a seminar, a really high-power seminar in Hayman Island a few years ago, in the presence of Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard, Swan, Brumby, and Anna Bly. And they had this very, very amazing panel, international. And what they said, now this is actually how you can have hope, especially with global warming. They had this panel, these are really big experts. And they said, okay, now this is the question I'm going to ask you. They say, this scenario has happened. A big ice sheet has fallen off Greenland, created a tsunami, and totally damaged the port of New York, which is a scenario which could happen any moment. And they said, so, the whole world realized this is important, and 1 year later they reduced carbon emissions to zero. So now that is what happened. I want you all to work backwards. How did you manage to do that? To get from what we're doing now to zero within 12 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And all these experts, when they could work backwards, we got zero. How do we get there? They hold all these amazing solutions. Now what happens with fear? We're here, we project onto the future, we make it so negative, it becomes hopeless. You have a cancer, stage 4, you're going to die. Okay? Stop that. 1 year later, you're still living. Imagine that. How did you manage that? What did you do to get to that point in the future? Don't work from here, working forward into the future. Start with a scenario where you want to be and work backwards. How did you get there? Now, those are the beautiful initiative, different ways of thinking, which bring up these incredible, wonderful solutions. But when we have fear of the future, we can't even think like that.
I'm not certainly suggesting fear
Yeah.
of the future.
Yeah.
Is what I'm suggesting is to take the issue seriously.
Yeah.
And this so far hasn't happened.
Now, this is what I'm saying. It's true.
Yeah.
Why hasn't it happened?
Because because inertia and the way in which our society is, the short-term interests of industry are more looked after more than the long-term interests of people.
Yeah, we are in the prisons of those types of views.
Yes.
So this is actually why most of those prisons of fear, prisons of fear of what I have now, not wanting to lose it, not wanting to lose my lifestyle. Those are the fears which I think are prisons which stop us even trying to escape.
But this is require a revolution in order to prevent those people who have those short-term views from dominating the way in which the society is going to go.
And I think one of those ways you can have that revolution is actually a revolution in ideas, a revolution in thinking, a revolution in attitudes. And that's what I'm trying to do. Getting people to see things in a different way.
How can we make people take this more seriously?
Yeah. Please ask them to tune in to BSWA website.
Practical advice.
Practical advice. Well, even Ajahn Sujato was saying this. It has to be an attitude change, first of all. Why have we got a government who is denying climate change? Because people in Australia voted them in. Why did they vote them in? The attitudes which we have to change. The attitudes of thinking that wealth is the way to happiness, instead of just contentment, being with family, living simply. Those are all stuff which I can actually do by example. Yeah. Having only a small bag when I travel. Yeah. Just one set of robes. Those are sorts of things which we can teach people by example.
But there's a long queue up to get into Bodhinyana Monastery.
Yeah, that's right, yes. So at least we can come out here, teach, inspire, encourage, and you realise you don't need that much to be happy in this life. People are more important than things. And simple teachings like that, get that out there more and more. Smaller homes, which means less concrete, less bricks, less iron being mined. Smaller things, and you don't need such big salaries. There's so much stuff you can do. The fear of changing the way we look at an economy. Gross national happiness, like in Bhutan, they're losing it though. I mean, I get to hobnob with all these big shots. Saw the Queen Mother, and she asked me to pray for Bhutan because it's being too developed. Too much concrete coming in instead of the old wooden buildings. It's losing it. Even Bhutan is losing it. So this is where, you've got to have some inspiration.
Shall we all become environmental protectors and leaders?
Environmental techniques is a result, it's not the cause. Yeah. The cause is change of attitudes. Yeah. Different priorities. People rather than things. Happiness rather than funds. You've got to have some money. And just our lifestyle, simplifying rather than making it more complicated. So anyway, thank you for that discussion, but we can go on for a long time, so I better get going.
Thank you.
But anyway, yeah. Okay, so thanks very much for listening. We've gone over time now, so I better finish off. Any questions, please come up and ask them individually afterwards. In the meantime, have a happy night, and see you again next Friday. We now pay respects to the Buddhist Dharma Sangha. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang abhivademi. Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipano Bhagavato